guys. Good, lovely Tuesday afternoon. Just going to wait for a few more people to jump on, if that's okay, on our live while we get ready for tonight. All right, thanks for joining in. For those of you that don't know, I'm actually live on our normal Property Bloke timeline tonight. Normally we go live just in the group, but I wanted to share this one tonight with the timeline, just so for those of you who aren't part of our Facebook group can see what we do and what I go through. So tonight, guys, I'm just going to be breaking down a couple of the common fears that property investors, especially first-time property investors, have. So from my perspective, I just wanted to share that with you now. And then if you want to, feel free to join our Facebook group for every other week we normally do. So I'd like to just make sure I can see my comments, guys. With tonight, feel free. Anytime, whack a question into the comments. I will be answering questions at some point, try and answer them throughout as well. But also, definitely, I'm always up for more and more questions. The more questions I get, the happier I am. Alrighty, guys. So, alrighty, thanks for coming along. So, let's get started. Hey, Ben, how are you, mate? Let's get started. So, first-time investors. So, many investors out there in the marketplace that, it's a big fear factor when buying your first investment property. And for many people, every single investment property you buy can be one of the largest financial decisions each single time. So from my perspective, I fully understand what fears people go through. Certain times I might get a little bit of cold feet myself when buying property, even though I've done hundreds over the years. But it's very important that everyone understands what the fears are and how to get around them. That's the biggest thing there, because if you can answer all your fears, there's no reason why you can't do it. Many people want to invest in property. They have the best intentions, that they want to take action. They do the research, they read the books, they do the courses, they do paid courses sometimes as well. They get fully educated to a point where they know where they can make money in property, replace their income that they have now, and possibly even replace a larger income. So what I mean by that is, if you're on $100,000 a year, you might be able to, in your mindset with the books and the courses and everything you've done, you may be able to achieve a higher income. But the biggest problem I see many people who have done everything for 10 years, 5 years, 15 years, but they've done nothing. So they've done every single little bit of education, but they have never, ever gone out and bought an investment property, which for me, that's shock. But it's because of the fear factors. They have in the back of their mind a few sort of high-level fears that's stopping them from doing that. So what I'm going to be doing tonight is just going through a few of the top, probably 5 or 6 fears that I see property investors have, and the reason why they don't go ahead. And this is how I get around it for you guys. So what I mean by get around it is solve the problem. I'm a problem solver. You got a problem with property, my job is to try and solve it for you, or come up with a solution for you as well. But to do this, guys, I'm going to share my screen. I have a little PowerPoint presentation. So I have a little bit, I'm just going to lose my ugly head for a little bit, but bear with me. I'm just going to share my screen with you guys. I hope everybody can see that okay. Let me get started. All righty, just making sure that looks okay. Perfect. All right, eliminating fees for first-time property investors. Now, any questions you got, guys, remember, whack them in the comments. I'm going to try and get to any questions you've got throughout the night so that I can answer everyone's questions. I'll probably have a little bit more than usual than what we do in the group, but feel free to pop questions in there. Now, if you're watching this live, or if you're watching this after, because a lot of people will watch it on the playback because maybe 7:30 is hell hour at their home, putting their kids to bed or whatever it might be, that's fine. Still feel free to put a comment in the question, and I will get back to you on that one as well. All right, so let's get started. And some of these fears, guys, to be honest, they not just for first-time property investors. Some of my investors who have had for 5 years plus still have these same fears. So don't feel as if you're the only people out there with these fears or objections for yourself of getting into the property market. Okay, quickly, this is the Property Bloke. Our vision is to expand the financial mindset of the everyday Australian by unlocking the true potential of what you can do through our education and mentoring. Of course, I do want to share this quick disclaimer. So what I'm doing tonight, please don't go out tomorrow and start investing without getting professional advice. That'd be silly. What this is just to explain that a couple of options out there for you guys. And yeah, just to get your juices flowing, just get your mindset right. That's the biggest thing I believe that a lot of people, why they don't invest is their mindset's just wrong. They're just too scared and they've got to answer these questions. So I'm going to go through some of these tonight. Alrighty. So these ones here are the most common fears we sort of come up with on the basis of when I see a brand new client or an existing client. These are the top, what's this, 2, 4, 6 things that we see that are biggest questions, I suppose, the biggest reasons why they haven't investing or where they may be a little bit nervous to invest would probably be the best one there. Hey, Ben. Hey, Steve. Hey, Luke. How are you, mate? Alrighty. Feel free to say hi, guys. Don't worry about that. I would like to be interactive as I can. That'll be perfect. So let's go through the first one, vacancy. And this is what I do in relation to how I eliminate the fear of vacancy. Now, me personally, vacancy is probably one of the bottom concerns I have. It's far from the top. But for some reason, in the marketplace, it's one of the biggest fears of the everyday investor. But for me, it's probably it's never really a fear because these are the reasons why I do it. So quite simple. Some of these will sound a little bit common sense, but you'd be surprised by how many people get it wrong. Okay, so set a fair market rent. So what I mean by that, of course, don't overprice your rent, especially have a good look at the marketplace. We're in an environment now with technology, we can do research quite quickly and quite easily. Back when I started, I'm going to sound a little bit old, it was just paper ads. There wasn't even online advertising. So to get a fair overview of the marketplace, it would take a fair bit of reading through the paper, a bit of driving past, where now a few clicks, you can see photos, you can see where they are. You can even see on Google Maps where it's exactly located compared to your property. And if you're super savvy, you can go onto the Google Maps with the Street View as well and see what your neighbours are doing. So set a fair market rent. One thing I don't normally recommend is self-managing. I definitely don't think self-managing is a great idea. Maybe if you had the same tenant for 10 years, it might be worthwhile. Even then, I'm not 100% sure. But self-managing is not something I would do. A lot of people think that's what they want to do, but it's not an easy thing because you have to make sure all your paperwork is right to make sure that you're covered. And from my perspective, a property manager is actually another layer of protection for you. So if something goes wrong with a property and the property manager made a mistake, they have to fix it, not you. And that leads me into, of course, professional and proactive property managers. So there's a lot of, in every industry, there's good and bad. So just because you bought the property through that real estate doesn't mean you have to use that property manager. Do a bit of research and make sure that property manager is actually good, and look at their reviews. We're so lucky nowadays with technology, we can do so much research. One thing I do is I consider pets. So depending on the scenario and the style of pet, there's some pets I don't consider, of course, but if it's a family dog or they've been a tenant for a few years and they want to get a puppy dog, I'm actually okay with it. There's obviously rules and regulations around that. There's a fair bit that we want to disclose and make sure you're protected, but just all I'm saying is that just consider some pets. Just consider it. You don't have to do it. Just consider it. That can sometimes limit the amount of vacancy you've got as well. A clean and maintained property. That's a big one. If your property is vacant, your property manager is not giving you great information or communication back, go and have a quick look at your property. There could be something wrong with it. It could be something simple, like a color on the wall, like the garden might need a bit of a weed. You'd be just surprised by so many people just say the property's vacant, and then after a month they go, "Oh, we're going to sell it. We're out of it. The property's vacant. It's no good. Property investment's not working for me." But at the end of the day, guys, sometimes you have to put a little bit of percentage work into your property. Now, I'm a huge one in believing in having the whole portfolio set and forget. But, sometimes you need to take a little bit of action and make sure the property's in good order. Okay, so the next one is tailor the property to the ideal tenant. So, how do I say it? In a nice way, there's basically two tenants. You've got your tenant who wants to rent for their lifestyle. Maybe they just don't see themselves buying a home. It's not something on their to-do list, whether it's, they're on good income, but they just don't see themselves buying their own property. That's the ideal tenant. So you want to make sure that professional tenant, that you buy a property in the right area where you're going to attract that tenant. So what I mean by that is, if you buy a cheap property, you're going to get a cheap tenant. And that's no offense to cheap tenants out there. Basically, in the bottom of the bucket, there's more tenants, but there's a lot more potential tenants that could do damage to your property and create it for a vacancy as well. All right, so tailor the property to the ideal tenant, find the right location, make sure you're going to have a good tenant in place. All righty. So the next one of the biggest fear is loss of employment. This is actually a big one. And realistically, everybody in a job, there's no such thing anymore as job security, I don't believe. Anyone can be made redundant tomorrow. That's why I love being a professional property investor. I love being a profession in my industry where I'm in full control of my employment. And if I want to work harder, I can. If I don't want to work harder, I don't have to. But for those of you who do have traditional PAYG incomes, you want to make sure you have a few of these things on the list to make sure that if you do lose employment, it's not going to be the be-all and end-all of your portfolio or personal cash flow. So the first one, minimum cash buffer per property. So what I mean by that is, for every property, I normally recommend to have around about a $5,000 buffer for every property you have in place. And I have in brackets there offset. So just make sure any cash you have is offsetting either the interest on your investment property or potentially the interest on your own home, but make sure you have a little bit of a cash buffer. Don't use all your holiday and long service leave. A lot of people don't understand what I mean by this, but you've got the luxury where you have holiday pay. Self-employed people don't have that. So what I'm saying is, don't let your holidays run down to zero on a regular basis. So, because everybody knows, if you lose your job tomorrow, you've got 6 weeks holidays or 10 weeks long service leave, you get paid out that money. So that, in a way, is a little bit in its own right income protection insurance. So make sure you don't use all your holidays. I always say have a bit of a buffer with holidays, and also try not to use your entire amount of long service leave. That basically, for me, is a little bit on income protection insurance. So that, of course, leads me into the next one, which is income protection insurance. But income protection insurance is very expensive. I don't have it. I don't normally recommend to get reviewed on that. I believe there's other ways around that. But of course, out there's income protection. So if you are super stressed, you've got a few properties under your portfolio, income protection insurance, I'm pretty confident it's tax deductible, but that's not advice. I'm pretty sure it is tax deductible income protection insurance. So if you do want it, go get it. Go get income protection. And of course, different industries are different. Your health, everything comes into availability there. The next one is redraw. So if you've got a home loan, of course, most people, you should be, if you're going to buy an investment property, you should be paying a little bit extra off your mortgage first. So therefore you'll have redraw. So redraw is a great aspect where if you have redraw available, there's two things you can do. You can, one, draw back the money and use that to fund your life for the next month while you find a new job. Or two, you can actually go on a holiday repayment where the bank takes your repayment out of the redraw availability rather than out of your direct debited bank account. So being in front with your home loan is always a good one. If you're lucky enough to have a couple of properties, trading a property to shore up reserves. So what I mean by that is sell a property off, take the cash out of it, which gets you through the tough period. You'd be surprised again how much, if you don't have an investment property and you do lose a job, you'd wish you had an investment property with some equity to get you through that little bit of a tough period. It might only be a week in between jobs, but for some people it's a month or so, depending on what industry you're in. So trading a property to shore up reserves is definitely a good one. And then you've got have some cash positive properties in your portfolio. That's a big one. So for me, I'm going to go through a little bit more on that later, but having some cash positive property in your portfolio will be a good one. Jess has just posted in the comments, Jess, who knows who, start again. For those of you who are my clients, you are fully aware, Jess is my left arm. Jess has popped in there. So if you have questions that are a little bit personal, feel free. There is a link in the comments there. You can book in a quick 15-minute call with me, and I will go through any questions you've got. But that's Jess will pop that in the comments again a little bit later as well. It's a quick 15-minute, no obligation call. Everyone has their own little scenario they want to run past me, which is quite common. Okay, interest rate rises. This is one I really wanted to bring up. This necessarily isn't a big fear, but it's something I wanted to talk about tonight because interest rates are low. When you have interest rates, you want to try and use a fixed rate on your investment properties. So depending on the rate at the time, of course, this is not advice. I do suggest to fix the rating, lock in a fixed rate, and therefore you know exactly where your money's at. Now, for some people, they lock in a fixed rate, and of course, in what we're seeing now is that rates have gone down, which is fine, but at least you know in your investment portfolio exactly what money's coming in and what money's going out. Of course, if you wanted to hedge your bets, and you can do a split home or investment loan. So you might do a percentage of it fixed and a percentage of that variable. So for some clients who buy an investment property, they might be lucky enough to own their own home or own their home through the strategy we put together. So we might have a bit of surplus cash, which we want to offset. So of course, most banks don't let you use the offset facility on a fixed rate. So we put that against the variable portion of the loan. So different structures for different people. The next one is share risk between banks or lenders. So basically, once your portfolio gets to a certain size, I'm always recommending to have a look or consider putting some of your loans with more than one lender, because the lender will give you good discounts, but there does come to a point where sharing the risk between banks and lenders is better. And as we've seen, some banks put up rates where other ones don't. Some banks drop rates where other ones don't. So from my perspective, sharing the risk between banks is definitely a good one there as well. And you'd be surprised, different banks, when we're looking at fixed rates, some of them are a lot different. They could be up to 0.5% different on a fixed rate option. So sharing the risk is definitely a way to go. Diversify fixed rate terms within the portfolio. This one, I've actually learned this lesson myself. This is 100%, this is 100% something that I did wrong many years ago, where I had a low fixed rate on about $2 million worth of debt. This was 15 odd years ago, and the whole lot came out onto the variable rate back in 2007, 2008, when interest rates were peaking through the credit crisis. And I had $2 million of debt go up around about 3%. So for those of you that are good with numbers, that's about $60,000 in interest a year I had to find all of a sudden. Lucky for me, that only was for a month or two, and then the interest rates fell out of the sky, which worked for me. But what I learned from that is that each property within your portfolio, if possible, it's not always possible, should have a different fixed rate term. So 1 3 years, 1 5 years, or just having them ending at different times, because obviously you're not buying every property at the same time. So whenever you buy a property, fix the interest rate, lock it in, but try not to line it up so it ends at the same date or very similar date to another property you've got. And don't forget about your home loan structure. So your home loan structure, if your home loan goes up in interest rates, that can also affect your cash flow, and you may feel you have to sell some of your portfolio off. On the home loan structure, depending on the timing, we do recommend doing very often a split home loan where some fixed, some variable. But interest rates is, it's like buying in the share market. You just got to hedge your bets. Okie dokie. Any questions? Feel free to ask some questions, guys. It's all good. Okay, damage by tenants. This is a big one because everyone watches a current affair when they put a damage by, everyone watches a current affair when the tenant goes through and destroys the property. But there's, like everything, I don't believe much of what the media says. They're just negative news. But of course, it does happen. Okay, so to avoid damage by tenants, there's a few things. Invest in a quality property, and that should also say, I guess, in a quality area. You'll probably find a lot of the stuff on a current affair or TV shows or whatever it might be. When you look around, it's not a very quality property, and it's maybe not in the most quality area either. So that's very, very important. I said this before, cheap rent can attract cheap tenants. Cheap rent and poor quality of property can definitely attract cheap tenants. Professional property manager, they'll make sure you have everything in place. They'll make sure they do the regular routine inspections, ingoing reports, outgoing reports. And for those of you who aren't aware, when you work inside an office with a property management department, for those property managers who have worked in the area for a substantial amount of time, they would normally know the dodgy tenants. So they'll get an application, Mrs. Smith applies for 1 Smith Street, I don't know, Clydesdale. They will know that tenant's not going to happen. Not going to happen. They don't even have to do a tenancy reference check. They'll know they don't want that tenant in one of their properties. They've had history with them before. And of course, landlord's insurance. Make sure you have landlord's insurance. A lot of investors out there don't have landlord's insurance. Landlord's insurance, they're all starting to come back now to cover you for rent after the COVID pandemic. But the biggest thing with landlord's insurance is make sure you're covered for malicious damage in case your property does cop a bad tenant. Now, you can do all the checks you like. It might not be the tenant that actually applied for the property that actually damages your house. You might get a mum who separates with her partner, or vice versa, and they get a new partner, and the second partner is the one that damages the property. So they weren't even on the original application. They may have only been there for the weekend. So a lot of landlords' insurance policies do not cover you properly. And what I mean by cover is make sure you get malicious damage. I think now the one we normally look at, Terry Shear or EBM insurance, is around about 60 or 70 grand for malicious damage. And also they pay out, guys. A lot of insurance companies want a police event, which police won't do. Or if you're outside of a lease, they won't cover you properly either. Even though your tenant won't sign a lease, they're still under the same lease conditions, but insurance companies always have loopholes to get out of it. So try and make sure you're 100% covered with a quality landlord insurance product. All right, I'm a huge one on that one. Even though it's very rarely claimed, I'll be honest, it's very rarely claimed, but it's like your home insurance. If you don't have your home insurance and it burns down, you don't have a house. It's the same thing, guys, same thing. All right. Next one we've got here is the fear of unknown. This is probably the biggest one. What people do, they just don't know what steps to take, don't know how to get started, have no direction on where to buy, what property suits them. So I do, even though I bagged out the guys that do invest in knowledge and books and courses, etc., and don't do anything, but I do suggest to get a little bit of knowledge under your belt. And that could be podcasts, books, courses, understanding your risk profile. So what I mean by that is just understanding where you feel risk is at a limit, and try not to invest outside that. So everyone's different with their risk profile. So depending on what you've gone through in your life, like my risk profile is very high. I would take on a high risk product, no problems at all. Yet I could meet someone tomorrow where they're scared of increasing their home loan by $100,000, let alone, buying a property for $500,000. A big one I always ask when about risk profile is, especially to a brand new investor, they might have their own home, been there for 20 years. The biggest question I ask, what's the highest price you've paid for a property? Normally it's in the 100, 200,000. And also, what's the largest mortgage you've ever had? So if you go out and buy an investment property for 500, your mortgage will probably be 520-ish if you borrowed the whole lot. If your biggest mortgage has only been 150, of course, that's going to be a bit of a fear for you. So you need to get your head around that and how it all comes together. Professional advice. So that's not the guy at the barbecue, even though people hit me up all the time. But professional advice is not your mum or dad if they don't do property. It is not your neighbor. It's not your brother. It's not your sister. It's not even an accountant who does not deal a lot with property. I would always ask, when I'm asking someone for professional advice, I'd be asking them, what have you got? What do you do? And the reason why I started doing that with people is there's nothing worse. I sat with a financial planner once, and he was trying to tell me everything I was doing for my client was wrong. And I went downstairs after meeting with him to have some lunch at a cafe, and he went downstairs and got into a 35-year-old Mitsubishi Magna. And I'm like, there's nothing wrong with having an old car, but there was a beat up old bomb and it looked like he didn't have any money, and he was a supposed financial planner. So get professional advice. They must have experience in the industry, whether they're a solicitor, accountant, financial planner. Make sure if they don't have property, don't listen to them. The next one is joint venture. Invest with an experienced partner. So maybe invest with your parents, for your first property, invest with your brother, or your sister, if they've had one property under their belt, your best friend as well. But make sure you have a lot of, out clauses if someone wants out, what the process would be. I always recommend to have a 1 or 2 page agreement that if something was to go pear-shaped with your relationship or with one of your finances, that you do have an out clause. But investing with an experienced partner for your first property isn't always a bad idea. Can get you into the marketplace and definitely build your confidence up. And always be careful of analysis paralysis. And that's the big one. If you overanalyze, you won't do anything. So you'll get to a point, guys, make a decision and move on. You'd be better off making a decision and learning from it than not doing anything at all. That's how I've lived my life, guys. Okay, so fear of unknown. Okay, so we're coming up the last one here. Now, the last one I want to break down a little bit. Does anyone have any questions, by the way? Oh, that's okay if you don't. It's all good. Feel free to shoot us a message later if you have a question, a personal question. All right, so these were our main ones here. Now, the bottom one, out-of-pocket cash flow. So I'm going to show you a quick strategy we use here at the Property Bloke. It's about 2 or 3 quick slides on how we deal with that. All right, so how long have we been going for? Sorry, guys. About 27 minutes, or not much longer, sorry, everybody. I like to sort of try and keep it under 30 minutes if I can. Okay, so out-of-pocket cash flow, and how we do that is if you go out tomorrow and buy a 100% negative geared property costing you $1,000 a month, that's out of pocket $1,000 a month. But what you have to do is you've got to mix up your portfolio with different styles of properties. So I'll show you how we do it here at the Property Bloke. We use a method that we call the steadfast method, which basically is a bit of a strong and safe solution to putting together a property portfolio. It's the way we sort of help you build the foundation of your property portfolio, whether or not you want to buy 2 properties or whether you want to buy 10 properties. It works either way. And how we do that, just quickly, guys. So the first thing we do is we get a cash flow property. It doesn't have to be the first property, but at the end of the day, we line up 2 properties next to each other in most cases. Cash flow for one and growth for the other. Sometimes it's around the other way. We might start with a growth property or a cash flow property, depending on the client and what we're trying to achieve. Sometimes we might start with 2 cash flow properties as well. But this is just a bit of a generic structure on how we eliminate that issue of out-of-pocket cash flow from a personal perspective. If you're buying into property, you want to make sure you're not, working just to have those investment properties. So your cash flow property could be a cash positive property, giving you say $100 or $200 per week cash flow. And your growth property could be a negative geared property. So what that might be doing is giving you negative 100 or negative 200. So as long as the cash flow property on one side is helping you or assisting you with the cash flow of your growth property on the other side, that's how we do it with what we call the steadfast method. So realistically, you could put 2 properties in place and your cash flow is not going to change today to what it was yesterday. And that's what property investment should be, guys. So you could do this 2 properties, you could have 4 properties, you can have 6 properties, you can have 8 properties. It doesn't matter. What's going to limit you with this strategy, and particularly the way we do it here at the Property Bloke, is more the banks, your borrowing capacity, when they're going to say, yep, no more money for you, Mr. Smith, you've had enough. And that's where we might diversify between different banks we just have to put it all on hold and just slow down with the growth of your portfolio till, your income changes. You might get growth out of one property, on sell, move it all around. A good property portfolio sometimes has to be adjusted. Alrighty, guys. But that's how we do it. That's how we do it here at the Property Bloke. And oops, that's the end of it. Oops, I'm back. Alrighty, guys. So that's what I'm talking about. They were the most common fears I see and how I get around them. Now, this video will always be on our timeline. So you can go back through it if I was talking a little bit fast for you. So I'm just trying to keep this down to a not too long of a video for everybody. But as of probably normally tomorrow, this is also uploaded onto our YouTube channel. Just Google the Property Bloke on YouTube. Jess is going to put in there the link again for the 15-minute call. If anyone has any questions, they can pop in there and just book a link, 15-minute chat. You go straight in my calendar. Sometimes I double book myself, so we might have to change you. But 15-minute call. I can answer any of your questions you've got, and you can just run your scenario past me to see if A, we can help you, or B, I can give you some direction of what you've got to do next to get started. We are starting a bit of a beginners education platform too for investors who for Australians who can't quite invest yet, but they want to get started, but just want to learn a little bit more. We're going to be doing that with a monthly Zoom call where you can join in for free. And ask any questions, but it is going to be a group environment, so there's no really one-on-one personal stuff there. But also, guys, if you are on our Property Blog page, and we do this every Tuesday night. As of next week we're going into more of what we call the juicy stuff. It's where we're going to break down next level investing. So we're going to go into subdivisions, construction, chunk deals, but quickly flipping properties. We're going into cash flow strategies, which are not the normal style of property investing, just bringing more strong cash flow into your portfolio as well, and how I put that together for myself. And all I really talk to you guys about is exactly what I'm doing personally. So I'm the one that always, I suppose, I'm the guinea pig when it comes to it. I'm the guinea pig. I always like to put it out there first, do it for a year, do it for 6 months, find out all the pros and cons, filter all that down to you guys to show you what you guys can do. I just want to see everyone get ahead financially, not relying on the government or your employers, except for our team members. We need them, of course. But guys, put that in there. If you go to the Property Bloke page, there is a link there to our group. But if you search in Facebook groups, you'll go, I think it's the Property Hub by the Property Bloke. But if not, come back to here, put in a comment, and we might actually put the group link into the bottom of this post here anyway, just so you guys have it in case you wanted to join. It's a free group, doesn't cost anything, and we always break down different styles of property investing. But of course, if you're not huge in the Facebook and you prefer to watch YouTube, they are uploaded normally 24 to 48 hours the next day on our YouTube channel. I love giving away free education because I do want to see everyone get ahead financially. There's nothing better than seeing people get rid of their mortgage or take big chunks out of their home loan and also bring some cash flow into their lifestyle. Alrighty, guys, thanks again. I hope I see you guys, some new fresh faces next week. But feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Guys, I'm Wayne Jessup, the Property Bloke, bringing a real property with real strategies to get the everyday Australian real results with property. Thanks again, and I look forward to chatting with you again soon. Have a good one, guys.